Hey guys, it's Mandee. You know I love Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, and one of the things I love the most is they're always doing new things. And I recently tried their new sports massage, and I've got to tell you, it's incredible. So you know I'm active and I'm always focused on wellness, and this is just one more thing that I am adding in to my routine because now I'm hooked. They use the Theragun, which of course is going to help increase blood flow to certain areas and muscles that might be sore or tired or need attention, but you also get to add on another upgrade. You know, whenever I was there, I chose to go ahead and do the cup gliding as well as the hot stones. They work really well with the Theragun, maybe like a triple threat. Definitely ask for it the next time you go in to Hand and Stone. Ask about the sports massage. You can book your appointment today online at handandstonetyler.com, or you can stop by and see them. They're located in South Tyler in the Cumberland Shopping Center.
Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, hosted by Mandee Montana, a podcast that celebrates women, their stories, their struggles, and ability to overcome. Conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, and courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast, presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. With over 20 massage therapists and 6 estheticians, certified and trained in multiple protocols, you can get an affordable massage or facial located right here in the East Texas area. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler or online at handandstonetyler.com. Welcome back to Celebrating Women. I'm Mandee Montana with my special co-host, Kellie Evanstein.
Hey guys.
Hey, so we're on location today. Kellie and I live on opposite sides of the state of Texas. So when we get together to record our book conversations, either Kellie comes to me or I go to Kellie, or sometimes we meet in the middle. And so we met in the middle today. So we're in an Airbnb at Lake Granbury. It's awesome. We're happy to be together. It's kind of like a book retreat. And as we're talking books, we have been focusing on strong female characters written by the author Sarah J. Maas. So we started with A Court of Thorns and Roses, ACOTAR, and talking about Feyre and those strong females in Prythian. And then we moved on to the Throne of Glass series with Celaena Sardothien and Aelin Galathynius and the strong females in Aurelia. And now we're on the third series written by Sarah J. Maas, Crescent City. And we're going to talk about Bryce Quinlan today. She is our protagonist. And she's a little bit different from Aelin and Feyre, right, Kellie?
She is very different. I had a hard time getting into this book. She's very abrasive. She's a very brash, abrasive character, which is such a departure from Aelin and Feyre because you liked them immediately. And Bryce is hard to like in the beginning because she's a party girl. She's into drugs. She's just this spoiled brat. And she's just not a very likable character. So it took me a minute to get into this series for that reason, because it caught me off guard because I loved the other two characters from page 1. And so, yeah, she's very abrasive. She's very like in your face, very cocky, which is a whole different vibe than the other two characters.
Yeah. The others are powerful and arrogant and confident, but Bryce has got this edge to her. And I think part of it might be, Kellie, because we meet her when she's a little bit older. So Feyre and Aelin, when we meet them, are kind of older teens, like 17, 18, kind of in that area. Yeah. Bryce is 23 when we meet her. So she's an adult. She uses adult language. And Crescent City is more of a contemporary style novel. It is fantasy. I think it's called urban fantasy would be the genre. But her language is abrasive, where we see Feyre and Aelin. In those worlds, they say things like, someone used a vulgar gesture. In Crescent City, we have F-bombs, and a fair amount of them. So it does feel edgier, more abrasive, more adult.
Yeah, she's having sex in a bathroom with a stranger. Yeah. Like right off the bat. And she's high because she's taking all of these drugs. And, you know, it's just a very stark contrast to how we got to know Feyre and Aelin.
Yes, it definitely is. And another kind of difference with the three protagonists, we see that Feyre and Aelin lose their parents, or their moms specifically, at a very early age, about the age of 8, both of them. And so they have to grow up and they have to be mature in different ways, but they both have to do that at a very early age. Feyre starts hunting and providing for her family. Aelin is thrown into an assassin's guild, and she has to learn how to be an assassin, torture, and be tortured from a very early age. which sounds worse than it feels when you read the book. And then with Bryce, it's like she has a family. So her childhood is a pretty happy
Pretty
one.
normal. She's got a loving mother, a loving stepfather who treats her as though she was his child. Like, she didn't, other than the fact that she's half Fae, and people kind of gave her a hard time about that and teased her a little bit until she, showed him she had a jelly jubilee. Then she was accepted by the other kids, which is a side story. But she really had a pretty normal upbringing and, went to college. So she had sort of a normal childhood and teenage years, and she was spoiled, and
she had to overcome some
things,
challenges,
but
not
like the other two.
No, not like the other two. She definitely had a childhood versus having to grow up really fast.
Yes.
And, she has a family. And I think that's a big difference as well. She has a half sibling, that Rune, from her Fae father. And she's not really in contact with them much as a child. Her mother had fled her father because he was, an awful person, very powerful, domineering, and he'd hit her.
He was the king of the Fae.
King of the Fae, but he hit her mother. And so her mother was like, I'm out. I'm not putting up with that. Another strong female that we'll talk more about in the next episode when we cover the rest of the strong females. But Bryce and her mom leave. That's when, she meets her stepfather. And Bryce begins to exhibit power, her Fae powers, even as a toddler. She has a starlight that she exhibits. And then we see her again kind of in her youth at 13. She goes through kind of a trying time where she's trying to reconnect with her father and understand her Fae heritage.
Her mother wants her to meet her real father and understand her Fae heritage. And so she sends Bryce to meet her father. And that's where she meets Rune, her half-brother that she had never met before. They become pretty close. It was not necessarily the heartwarming reunion.
No, it didn't go well. And so she didn't really connect with her father. He offered her hush money to not tell anyone that he was her father. She chose not to take the money, but she still didn't divulge that. She didn't want to be connected to him. He's a jerk. But she did stay in contact with Rune for a few years. Those were some of the happiest years of both of their lives until they had a falling out, as siblings sometimes do. Rune said something offensive and tried to repair it. Wasn't repairable at the time. And then Bryce goes off to college. She makes some really good friends, stays friends with them past college, and that's where we meet her. She's 23.
Graduated from college, working for Griffin Antiquities, living with her college roommate. They're now roommates. Her name is Danica. She is a wolf shifter and she's the granddaughter of the Prime, which is the top wolf. He is the head of all the wolves. She's the granddaughter. And so she is the leader of the Pack of Devils, which is a group of wolves that she leads.
And they're kind of like a police unit,
yes,
sort of. And Bryce's brother Rune does that for the Fae. They have kind of their own little police unit. They call it the Ox. And there's various ones within these creatures. And I think that we just have to quickly mention that there's a lot of different creatures in this book. It's the best way that I know how to describe them, species.
Yes.
We've previously seen humans and Fae, mostly, in the previous series. This one, we have some diversity. We have humans, we have Fae, we have wolf shifters,
we have angels,
we have vampires,
witches, mermaids,
people,
mermen,
Draki, demons. The ones that we are going to focus on, though, Fae, humans, at least in
wolves.
What we're talking about, Bryce, wolves and angels, primarily. But yes, there's a lot going on in this series. And it is a little bit difficult to get into. So if you're like, what are they talking about? If you read it, you'll understand. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of background that's laid to kind of do the world building early in this. But pretty quickly into it, something tragic happens that drives everything else forward. And it's the death of Bryce's roommate, Danica, in the Pack of Devils. And so as we're talking about celebrating women and the strength of Bryce, we don't see her as a strong female in the beginning of this book. We see her, as Kellie said, being a spoiled brat. Danica's death changes that. At her core, she's not a bad person. She's just not had to mature until she loses Danica. And it's traumatic. A lot happens that night. She's been partying. She's high as a kite. She's drunk off her butt. She comes home to mutilated bodies and her best friends, her roommates, and then she hears something. It's a demon that's fleeing the scene, and she chases it. And this is really where the first time we see Bryce like in action, her strength in action.
Yes, and she chases the demon, and she's barefooted, running over glass, all of these things to get to this demon. And she catches up with him in an alley, and he is attacking an angel. We don't know who he is at this point, but an angel, that's all she sees. And she is able to get the demon, like runs away.
Distracted. Mm-hmm.
And so she is trying to keep this angel alive, and she calls for help and all of these things. But she is almost catatonic in her shock because of everything she's experienced with the murders, and she's so high. And, she's basically, she comes across this angel who has been just completely mutilated by this demon. So she's like seriously holding his guts in to keep him from dying. Mm-hmm. So she is in shock.
Yep. And she sustains an injury. Other angels come onto the scene. She is at least able to get in touch with emergency services. They clean her up. They help him. He survives. She doesn't know it because she's in shock and nobody tells her who this angel is. But the two angels that help her and interrogate her end up coming back in the series pretty quickly, or at least in the book pretty quickly. So after that night, the book then fast forwards 2 years.
Yes.
As the plot moves forward throughout the book, those 2 years are reflected back on a few times. And what we learn about Bryce during those 2 years is that she quit partying. She got sober. Doesn't tell anybody that she got sober.
She still sometimes kind of hides behind that party girl image, even though she's not that person anymore.
Right. She matures. She's dealing with survivor's guilt. She doesn't ever get her leg looked at medically. It's still injured, and she's got a limp from it, even though she's walking around in like stiletto heels all the time. She's limping around with this injury.
She lives with pain all the time because she feels like she deserves it. And she could go to a med witch and have it fixed to where it leaves no scar, like it never happened. She chooses not to because it's important to her to live with that pain every day. It's kind of a reminder of what happened, but it's also part of that survivor's guilt.
Mm-hmm. So then as we revisit, we fast forward, Bryce is about 25 years old. She's in her mid-20s. She's still working for the Griffin Antiquity. She maintained her job through that time. And these two angels show up, and they're wanting answers about that night and about Danica. And this is coming from high up. The hierarchy in this land, there's like this Fae King, there's a Prime of the Wolves, there's an Archangel, and they're all kind of the powers that be, and they work together. But really the governor's kind of like the head guy. And so...
And he's an Archangel.
And he's
the governor's the Archangel.
Mm-hmm. And so he's enlisted these other two angels that were on the scene that night to go and recruit Bryce to help uncover the mystery of Danica's death and to find this artifact, this horn that's been missing, that was even missing when Danica was alive. It went missing just before her death. And so that's kind of what drives this book, is this search for who killed Danica and the Pack of Devils, and the search for this horn. And all the characters are interacting with each other, looking for these truths. And Danica has laid all these clues. She's this interesting character that even though she's deceased, she is one of the most important characters throughout the entire series, because so many things that she did in her life, she was searching for a truth of the histories of these peoples, of the Fae, of the Shifters and all. She wanted to understand where they came from. And she never talked to anybody about it. She didn't tell Bryce. Bryce didn't know. But as Bryce is trying to solve her murder, she starts to uncover this stuff, and Danica wanted her to find the truth.
But it's very hard for Bryce because she's learning all these things about Danica. She thought they were as close as sisters, and she knew everything there was to know about Danica. The more the story goes on, she realizes that she was leading a whole different life that Bryce didn't know anything about.
Yeah. So you've got these two very strong females. They're best friends. They do everything together. One of them's gone, and she's finding this double life, and it's really unsettling. And she's doing it alongside this angel, this Hunt character that has been employed by the Archangel Governor to help Bryce, because he This demon keeps showing up.
Cristallos
This
demon.
Cristallos
and he's
demon.
the demon hunter.
And he's a
the
demon
Umbra
hunter.
Mortis.
He's an angel, the shadow of death. And so he hunts demons.
And he has magic. He has power that no
Lightning.
one else has. He is the only one with lightning magic. He is the strongest. But that power has been muted because he was part of a rebellion 200 years ago and they lost. And
He's
so
essentially a slave.
He's made a slave, and they have branded him on his forehead with this halo looking thing out of magic ink that suppresses his power. So even with his power suppressed, he's one of the most powerful angels. That's why his job is the Umbra Mortis, because he's sent to kill these demons. And basically his job is the governor or the archangel's assassin. Anybody that he's trying to get rid of, he sends Hunt to go and kill. That's why he's called the Umbra Mortis.
The shadow of death. And Bryce knows exactly who he is, and she has no interest in working with him.
She is not afraid of him, and she could care less.
No, she thinks he's an alpha hole, which is what she calls powerful shifters and fae that are jerks. And so that's kind of how she sees him. They treat each other pretty badly in the beginning because they don't want to work with each other. He thinks she is worthless, doesn't know anything, party princess, and, she thinks he's an alpha hole. But they find that they both are pretty resourceful. He learns that she's actually pretty intelligent, and they start to form a friendship, and they start to actually build some trust and gain some ground, finding some clues. And they start working with her brother because he's kind of looking for the same thing. The Autumn King is wanting to know why the Fae are losing power, so he sent him in search of this artifact, this horn that's missing. The three of them start kind of working together. And I think that it's important to note that because I think that's part of Bryce's strength. And it's one of the strengths that we've seen with the other protagonists too, and in these books, all of them, is that power in relationship.
Yes.
Developing relationships, whether it's with other females or within your family or within friendships, that there's a lot of power there. And that's one of the things that I am always reminded of when I read these books that I take away from it is a need to nurture my relationships because
Yes.
there is real power in that. You start to see Bryce do that. She's got her friendships from college with the girls that are still alive, Fury and Juniper, but she's not as close since Danica's death. And so she's rekindling her relationship with Rune. She's starting to work with Hunt. They're starting to become, there's a little bit of banter. They start to be kind of playful with each other. And the friendship kind of starts to turn into something more.
A little bit more of an attraction.
Yes. And so all of that is happening as they're finding these clues and uncovering these truths from Danica. And it all kind of comes to a head towards the end of the book when there's a drug deal that goes wrong. It turns out that Danica had been around this drug called synth that's very, very dangerous. She was trying to get it off the streets. She was learning about it. It had something to do with her death. They're putting the pieces together. Hunt's trying to get it off the streets, trying to uncover some more truths as well. And he ends up in a deal that goes bad. And he gets captured. His wings are cut off. They call it the living death.
Yes.
And he's about to be given as a slave to a really bad archangel, one that he fought in that rebellion Kellie was talking about 200 years ago. And in the process of all this, Bryce realizes what's showing her strength again and protecting the people that she
Yes.
loves.
Even though she feels betrayed by him, she tries to take his place to try to keep him from getting his wings cut off and to keep him from having to go. Because this other archangel, her name is Sandriel, she is evil. She is evil. And she's trying to protect Hunt from having to go back because he used to be a slave to Sandriel, and it was a nightmare, and Bryce is trying to keep him from having to go back.
So in the process, she's unsuccessful because her brother's like, no, she can't sacrifice herself. I'm her brother. And as her Fae brother, I can say that she has no power and I'm not letting her, which is part of what Bryce hates about the Fae. So anyhow, the summit happens. Hunt goes off to the summit. Bryce is still in Lunathian and she's still looking for this horn. She's uncovering some clues. She's starting to really think through everything she's uncovered and she's starting to put the pieces together.
Yes.
And while at the summit, the Archangel Micah is not there. Everybody's kind of bored. They're talking about government stuff, policies, whatever. The governor has to be gone. Micah has to step away. He's got an appointment. So Sandriel is leading in his stead. Rune is there. The Autumn King is there. Jessica is there. Bryce's
That's Bryce's
boss.
boss.
All of these other characters are there.
All these power players.
Bryce is back at the Antiquities office. And then Micah shows up.
Yes, and she realizes very quickly that he is up to no good.
Yes.
And that he's kind of behind these things that have been happening. And so being the quick thinker that she is, she somehow got a text off to the guys at the summit to pull up the
Video feeds.
camera feeds in the Antiquities building so that everybody that's at the summit can see what's going on. And so through this, she gets Micah to admit that he's behind it all. And
All of it. The drugs.
all of it.
The missing. Well, he doesn't know about the missing artifact. He thinks he knows where it is. That comes to light. But he's behind Danica's death. He's behind the drugs being loose. He's the problem.
He is the bad guy. And it's all about power. And so she, through this process, he's there to kill her. And so he doesn't mind confessing to all this because he thinks he's going to kill her. And Bryce is smart enough that she's able to get away from him. Her friend Lahaba, who is a fire sprite, sacrifices herself to enable her to get away because he's trying to kill her. He's trying to attack her. And she remembers that there is it's called the God Slayer. It's a rifle, a very powerful rifle up in Jessica's office that's broken into 3 pieces. She knows where the bullet is. It's in the safe. Micah gives her this synth because this drug that's so powerful but so dangerous that it thinking
destroys.
it's going to kill her, and nobody realizes, but she has an antidote in the same safe where the bullet is. So just because she is so incredibly intelligent, she's so quick on her feet, she's able to get to the office. She slams down the antidote so that the synth is not going to have the same reaction. She's able to put the gun together and she's able to kill Micah before he kills her. And it, blows him into smithereens. So she vacuums him up. And all of this is on camera for everybody to see exactly what happened. And these archangels, you're not supposed to be able to kill them.
Yeah, they're very
And here
powerful.
she is, a human that just killed an archangel after getting him to admit all the horrible things he's done. And it was her,
And she
her
does it
quick wit.
in front of all the power players.
They all see it. She makes sure they all know exactly what happened. But she is a human.
Half human, half fae.
But
that has no power.
No fae power. The only thing that distinguishes her is half fae. She's got the pointed ears. And because nobody really knows about her star power yet, which is just a big bright light, honestly, at this point. But just because she is so smart, she's so quick on her feet.
She's done all this training with her
She's done all this training
stepfather.
with her stepdad. That's how she knew about the guns, that she could put it together quickly on the run, like all of these things, her aim, all of these things just shows like her physical strength, but also her intellectual strength at this point.
And her ability to maintain focus in chaos.
Yes.
She knows the objective, and she's practiced these skills with her stepfather, who was a trained warrior. He prepared her to assemble guns and be able to fire them. I mean, she's a sharpshooter just like he is. He's taught her all of these skills so that when she is in a chaotic moment, she's practiced it so much that like she's just on it.
Yes.
It's like second nature. And that is such a strength. It's like to be able to be in life and to be in a chaotic moment and to be able to go into a zone and a strength and a focus, like that full thing, whether you're in a fantasy world or you're in the real world. And that's one of the things that I admire about Bryce, is that she had prepared herself physically and mentally along the way so that when she is in a moment of crisis, she can be at her best. And so you think that's the climactic ending of the book. And then you realize there's several more chapters left.
It's like, oh no.
What else is going to happen? Well, during this villain monologue that's happening with Micah, I mentioned that there's that lost artifact. Bryce has figured this out, and it comes about in the conversation with Micah. But Danica, in her infinite wisdom and power, prior to her death, one of the first things we see about Bryce early in the book is that she's complaining about a tattoo. It hurts. Party Princess just got a tattoo. This tattoo, it turns out, happened to be that artifact that was missing, this horn, this powerful artifact that Danica had crushed down and blended with witch ink, tattooed into Bryce's back. Well, that becomes important because this horn has the power to open portals to other worlds. And you may remember we saw some of that world portal stuff in Throne of Glass with Aelin when she was talking to the gods, right? This horn, when it's charged with power, will open a portal. And so right before Bryce killed Micah, he had hit her with power to open a portal to hell because he is trying to take over Lunathian. He's power hungry, as Kellie mentioned. So,
which allows, that portal is allowing demons to come in.
Correct.
So all these demons start attacking Crescent
Well, Bryce
City.
is vacuuming up the ashes of
Yes.
the Archangel inside the Antiquities Gallery. And then she opens the door. And she sees literally that all hell has broken loose.
Yes.
In
And
her
you have
city.
to remember that all the big power players are off site. They're like 30 minutes away, like a helicopter. Like they can't get there. So there's nobody. And a lot of the police presence, like the Ox and the Wolf Shifter, their packs. And, you know, a lot of the police type people are overprotecting the power players.
At the summit.
So there's no one in the city
To
to protect
defend.
the city from these demons. So here goes Bryce.
Yeah. So again, she's good in a crisis, man. She like straps on a rifle, grabs a sword, and takes off. And she realizes that she needs to protect the most innocent because she knows that the Fae are going to protect themselves. The wolves are going to protect themselves, but nobody's going to protect the humans. They have no defense. So she goes there first. And it is a very heroic moment. I've got chills just thinking back to...
Because she does not think twice about running into danger. That's another one of her strengths, is she honestly, she does not hesitate to throw herself into dangerous situations to protect the innocent and
She's
to
a
protect
warrior.
people. Like, she does not hesitate. She's out there fighting demons, and because they have these like storm shelter type things that are set up in case of an attack where everybody goes in and you have so long to get in there and then the door's shut. And so, you know, like in the Fae area where the Autumn King, her dad, lives, they close that down and they're all protected. And, you know, so all the Fae are getting themselves protected and shutting doors early and leaving these humans out. And she's, you know, doing everything she can to save as many as she can. And the people at the summit are, some of them, like Hunt and her friend Fury, they're trying to get back to help her. Because remember, all of this is still showing on video screens. They're all at the summit seeing all of these things happening and seeing how she is going by herself, basically. Nobody's helping her until Ethan, her friend that's a wolf, comes to help her against orders. But she's out there battling by herself. Nobody's helping her because they're all so busy trying to protect themselves.
And through this process, she realizes that she is not going to be able to fully protect people unless she really steps into her power. And there is a process in this world where Faes and shifters step into their immortality through a process called the drop. And it's discussed throughout in various ways throughout the book. But she's got to make the drop to gain her power and more immortality in order to, you know, save more people. So her friends are coming back from the summit. She realizes she's got to do this, but when you make the drop, you've got to have an anchor. And she and Danica were going to make the drop together. And then, of course, it didn't happen. Danica gets killed. So she doesn't have an anchor for the drop until through kind of some magic, kind of, I don't know, maybe even her imagination a little bit, she sort of reconnects with Danica in the afterlife. And Danica offers to be her anchor. Bryce falls into a deep level of power, or rises into, I should say, because the imagery is that you make the drop and then you have to make the ascent back. You drop down into your power and then you rise out of it again. And when she rises out of it, she rises to a level that is higher than her father and higher than her brother.
So she's like the most powerful fae.
She is now the most powerful fae, which changes the power dynamics a little bit as we move on throughout the story. But that kind of brings us sort of to the end of book 1. Bryce has risen into her power. They've defeated the archangel. And then we realize that there's actually another governing body that might be worse than Micah.
Yep, the Asteri.
Bryce and Hunt, after they have saved the city, get a phone call
From the sort of the leader of the Asteri. His name is Rigulus. And so their understanding is that the 6 Asteri, they're stars. Mm-hmm. That's their understanding.
They have a star within them. Yes.
We find out later that's all a big lie. But right now that's what they think they are. But they take on a fae-type body. And so Rigulus comes across as this almost, not adolescent, but very young.
Teenage boy.
Boy. And he contacts Bryce and Hunt and basically tells them, okay, I'm not going to kill you. Oh, we forgot. Sandriel, who is the archangel that's the evil one that Hunt was going to be given back to, during the chaos of everything that's happening, Hypaxia, who is the queen of the witches, was able, because she's also a med witch, to remove the ink that suppressed Hunt's power from his forehead. And so when he had access to his full power, he basically went and ripped Sandriel's head off. It is a big deal that they killed 2 archangels. Mm-hmm. A big deal. Mm-hmm. And so they should have been brought to justice for that. But Rigulus basically tells them, if
you solved a problem for me. They were both creating problems.
But as long as you keep a low profile and stay quiet, I will let you live. And that's really kind of how the book ends.
Yep.
Book 2 kind of begins with them trying to lay low,
live a normal
life,
life,
not cause any waves, however, you find out Bryce, she's not going to give up on anything. She still wants answers about some of the stuff that she found out about Danica. So that starts to continue.
We find out that Danica knew even more than we thought we knew she knew. And so it just keeps moving forward. And really, so there's 3 books. There's Crescent City 1, House of Earth and Blood. Crescent City 2, House of Sky and Breath. That's the book 2 that we're about to talk about. And then the last one that was written, House of Flame and Shadow, is the 3rd book. We think there's going to be a House of Many Waters. And I say all of that because if you read the books, in the very beginning, it talks about the 4 houses of Midgard, which is their planet. So as we get into the 2nd book, House of Sky and Breath, really we're following the same kind of mystery. What did Danica know? What truth was she searching for? And we see various players come in to help solve this. Bryce and Hunt are trying to live this normal life, and then this Fae Prince shows up out of nowhere and kind of stirs things up. It's Rune's cousin, Cormac. Mm-hmm. There's 2 different lands of the Fae on this planet. Midgard is the planet. Lunathian is where they live. Well, there's this other place kind of across the sea called Avalon. And they're a little bit more behind the time. Is that how you would describe it?
Yes.
They're a little bit more like the Fae and Prithian.
Yes.
They dress more old-fashioned. They're not as contemporary. And so Cormac shows up. He's the crown prince of the Avalon Fae. And basically lets Bryce know that her dad has said, hey, you're going to marry him.
You're going to marry Cormac. You're
going
a
to marry
distant cousin. Because we need to make the Fae stronger.
Exactly. And, as we mentioned before, she's got this budding relationship with Hunt, so she's not too excited about that.
The beginning of the book, it introduces a new character named Sophie Renast, and she ends up getting killed, but she has a brother. And so a big part of what we're trying to do in the first part of the 2nd book is locate this brother. Mm-hmm. His name is Emil. Everybody wants him because they think he's a Thunderbird, which is a very powerful Vanir or Fae. It's very rare
all dead.
Because the Asteri has killed off all the other Thunderbirds.
Because they're a threat to them.
Because they're a threat to them. And so they think that Emil has this same Thunderbird power that the sister, Sophie, had, but she basically lied about him having power so they would think he was important enough to save from the death camp that he had been taken to. So the first part of this book is all of these different, in the first book, all the different groups are looking for the horn. And in this book, all the different groups are looking for this kid named Emil.
And Bryce, being the strong, dynamic, smart, strategic female that she is, locates Emil, doesn't tell anybody except her mom through this really clever postcard code system that they've had since she was a kid. And she gets Emil to safety, and her parents adopt him and change his name.
Cooper.
He becomes Cooper, and he lives off in the mountain home of Nidaros with Bryce's mom and stepfather.
What you learn with all of these different groups that are trying to find him, they all want to use him. And he's just a kid.
Like
and
14.
They all want to use him as a weapon. And Bryce is just like, and her attitude is, he's a kid. Like, we need to find him to protect him because he's a kid. All these other people want to use him, but he is a kid.
Yeah.
Like, we should not be hunting him.
Another reason we all love Bryce.
Yes. Like, that tells you about her character as well. We've talked about some of the things that we don't necessarily like about Bryce's character, but the thing that keeps coming up over and over is she does really care about what's right and protecting the innocent. And so her whole thing is, I'm going to find this kid because somebody's got to be an advocate for him as a kid. Somebody needs to protect him and not just want to use him.
And she knows what it feels like to not have power, to be half human, and to be raised as a human and not really have it. So she empathizes with people that don't have power and that have been belittled or condescended upon. And so she's really trying to protect that. And not just Emil, but that's a really great example of it, and a really great way to show like how she's gone from being, somebody who was doing drugs and having casual sex and just not caring about anybody but herself.
Yes.
To someone who is protecting the innocent, so to speak.
And putting others
before her.
Before herself, and putting herself in danger for these people that she's trying to protect.
She really steps into a leadership role in this book, whether she wants to or not. And she begins to understand through her connection with Cormac that there are probably more powers that she has access to. And so even though she doesn't want to marry him, she realizes that they could work together in a way where she can learn to develop some of her powers. And it's possible that they could, work together to find Emil and maybe do some good in this world, because she's also coming to understand through information that Danica has left behind and through her conversations with Cormac that the Asteri probably don't plan on letting Bryce live forever. She did kill 2 archangels, as Kellie mentioned. They're kind of like parasites on this land through some of Danica's information. And it comes about in a fun mystery sort of way throughout the book. But as we kind of get to the climactic ending of it, we realize that Bryce is going to take them on.
Yes.
She's not scared. Again, like this is her strength. She's got that audacity of like, okay, so you're a god in my world? Okay, whatever. I'm not going to put up with the way you're treating people. You're wrong, so you're going down. And I'm going to be the one that takes you down.
Yes, she is not afraid. And these are the most powerful beings in their world. Now, some of the information we find out in this book, and more so in the third book, we find out how they're getting their power and how they are suppressing the power of the Fae that are on Midgard. But they are the most powerful beings, and she doesn't care. Because what they're doing is wrong. The way they treat people is wrong. The power structure that they've set up on this world is wrong. And she's willing to take them on.
Remember when Aelin fought the gods in Throne of Glass? It's similar. Those gods were like all-powerful beings. And Aelin still said, nope, I'm not putting up with this. We're going to fix this. I'm sending you back to your home world or whatever, right?
Yes.
And she fought Maeve, who was like this demon queen. And like super powerful. It's a similar power structure that Bryce is fighting with the Asteri. And so she goes to take them on. She realizes that they're gaining power every time one of those Fae or shifters makes the drop.
They're taking their power.
That's like their food. That's what sustains them. And it suppresses the magic within the Fae and the shifters in their world. They don't come into their full magic when they make the drop because they give up some of their power to feed the Asteri.
But they also realize through all this, what they realize is the Asteri have put something in their water source that is like a parasite that suppresses them as well.
That's right. And that does come up in book 3. But the reason why we're kind of telling you all of this now, though, is because we want to cover the plot, but we also want to focus on Bryce's character arc. And we really see in the first book, we see that hero's journey. In book 2, we see her uncovering more truths, but she starts to get really frustrated at the end of that book because what she's learning through another great villain monologue with the Asteri Rigelus at the end of book 2, she's learning that all the history that she's been taught, everything that she knows about her world has been a lie. It's been deception. Deception.
And she's pissed.
And she's really angry about it. She's so angry, in fact, that she is ready to go to hell and bring back demon armies to destroy the Asteri.
Yes.
And she has, throughout the first book and through the second book, she's had communications with different princes of hell that have made her believe that they would be her allies.
Yes.
They've helped give her information along the way. They've aided her in various ways. And they've, kind of challenged her in ways too. But at the end of book 2, she's pissed off.
Yes.
And she's ready to go get the demon princes of hell and come back and defeat the Asteri. And
remember, because she's got the horn on her back, she's a world walker.
Yes.
She can go through these portals to different worlds. So she's going to try to go to hell through one of these portals. But the only way the horn works is if she's supercharged with power. And so to help her, Hunt shoots her with his lightning. She goes through this gate to this other world, and Hunt and the 2 guys that help him, which are Rune and then Baxian, who is another character, they're captured and they're put in the Asteri dungeons and they're tortured while Bryce goes to another world.
And that's where book 2 ends.
That happens to be
the homeland of the Fae and the home of
Rhysand.
Yes.
She meets Rhysand. They're long lost cousins.
We don't actually know their full relationship.
Right.
But he looks just like Rune.
Yes.
And she can't speak their language. And so it's very confusing. Rhysand is the only person in Prythian that speaks the ancient Fae language. And you might remember, if you've read the books, that Bryce also knew the ancient Fae language from her work in the Antiquities Gallery. So they managed to communicate a little bit there. And that brings us to like this massive cliffhanger that, book 3 just came out last February, and there were it's like a year or 2 in between, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen?"
It's Rhysand. We're doing some cross worlds here. What the heck?
What the heck is going to happen? And so many theories on Instagram and TikTok and all over the internet. There were so many theories about how these 2 worlds were going to interact. And I think a lot of people had this vision for Avengers Endgame. I mean, I was getting caught up in the theories. Kellie knows. I was sending her
she was reading
reels.
We talked about, she gets into the weeds and the research, and she was watching everything she could watch and listen to about all the different theories of how these worlds are going to cross over. And
of course, nobody knew but Sarah.
Yes.
Right? Nobody really knew but Sarah. And
Yes.
so a lot of people were disappointed with what happens in book 3 because, they had hyped it up to be something that was going to be maybe more time in Prythian with more of the characters, and maybe some of the characters would go back to Midgard with her and some things like that. That's not exactly what happened.
I can't describe the feeling of finding out at the end of that book that where she lands is like in the front yard of the house that Rhys and Farah built on the river.
Yeah.
And that's where she lands. And
Azrael finds her.
And it is just like, oh my gosh, I've got to wait to find out what's going to happen until book 3 comes out. So book 3 comes out, and I'll tell you, it is a long book. It is a long book, but we're not going to have time to go into a lot of the plot points of it.
Essentially, Bryce is going to try to defeat the Asteri.
She's in Prythian.
She's not in hell.
And she's trying to find information. It's basically she's going to take on the Asteri, is basically what all of book 3 is about. But there is a lot
of information
and background and how it all ties together and where her power came from. And, the people they thought were good were actually the bad guys. And, she finds out the history of how their world came to be. And there's so much information that we can't really go into it on this podcast, or we'll be here for 3 hours. One of the things, talking specifically about Bryce, and if you listen to podcasts and read different things about book 3, people do not like Bryce.
No.
Because she's just kind of a bitch. Like she's rude. Like all of these people that are
she treats her friends
family
badly.
And her friends, like she treats them badly. She's very rude to people. She's very, she's always been abrasive, but
she has no trust for these new fae that she's met.
She's just bitchy.
Yeah.
And she's very secretive and very defensive, and she's very sneaky, and she does a lot of things that put other people in danger that she doesn't even tell them about. I mean, it's just and a lot of it is just that anger at the fact that she realizes that everything she's ever known or believed is all a lie. All of it.
And if you think about it, she's a history major. She works at an antiquities gallery.
Yes.
So she's immersed herself in those historic truths. And what she realizes is at the end of book 2, when she's taken on the Asteri, is that everything that she knew was a lie through a different world.
Yes.
And we're not going to get into the details of that because that's a big chunk of...
You really need to read the book.
You really need to read the book.
Because it's very, very interesting. We just don't have time to cover it.
Yeah. And if you love piecing all of those things together and understanding how these worlds interact and are interwoven, go back and read A Court of Silver Flames and read House of Flame and Shadow back to back, because there's a lot of history in both of those. There's big chunks of it that's revealed, and you can kind of start putting some of those pieces together, or you could just, listen to other podcasts that cover some of those things. But we're focusing on Bryce's arc. And so Hero's Journey, book 1, book 2, she's uncovering all of these truths, gets really angry, realizes that she's been lied to. And in book 3, she is angry, as Kellie said, and she's trying to come to terms with, if this is all a lie and I'm going to eradicate the villain, how am I going to do that? Because they are all powerful. And then 2, if I do that,
then what?
Who's in charge? And she realizes very quickly she not only has to take out the Asteri, but she needs to take out some of the other powers in Lunathian as well. And she also recognizes pretty quickly that she's going to have to step into more of her power.
A leadership role.
Physically taking on more light power as she learns about the history of where her power came from and these two worlds and how they are connected. She takes on more physical power that way. She unites. There's a prophecy in the beginning of book 2. Well, we hear about it some in book 1, but definitely book 2. There's a prophecy about uniting a sword and a dagger, and that would bring the Fae together, that the Fae would be united. And so that happens at the very beginning of book 3, because as Azrael has Truth Teller, this dagger, it is very much the twin blade to the Star Sword that Rune had carried around in the first couple of books, and then Bryce takes with her as she teleports to this other world that she thinks she's going to hell. She takes the Star Sword with her, and it reacts only to those with that starlight that she and her brother have.
Yes. But hers is way more powerful than Rune's.
Right. And so as she's in this new world, these two blades have also come together. She has returned to the homeland of the Fae. These two peoples have united. And she starts to understand that with the power of these two blades, she's going to be able to defeat the Asteri.
Yes.
That comes about 3/4 of the way through the book. There's a lot of fun stuff that happens along the way with the various characters and side plots that are happening throughout.
And that's the thing that you have to know going into this series is we thought we had a lot of characters and a lot of side plots in the Throne of Glass and the Akatar series, but that's nothing compared to all the different side stories and side things going on in this. So know that going into reading it, that it is a lot that you've got to keep up with. And one of the things that you're going to see Bryce is a natural leader. And she was the party girl in the beginning. But as we move through, you know, books 1 and book 2, people start to look to her for what to do. Like, she's a natural
brother,
leader.
Hunt.
And because she's so strategic in her thinking, people just automatically start looking to her for what to do. As we get into book 3 and it's revealed, she's basically the Fae princess, and she's owning that now. But as she's going through these things and realizing, I'm going to have to be the one to lead these people. If I get rid of the Asteri, I'm going to have to lead. She doesn't want to be the leader, but she's having to step into a leadership role that basically is going to create the foundation for this new world she's trying to create, where these power structures don't exist anymore.
Right, where the parasites are gone.
Yes. And there's not this unequal distribution of power between all the different Vanir groups and between the Fae and the humans. Her ideal world is we all live in harmony. And there's no one group of people that's more important than any other group of people. We all live and work together. And that's the world she's trying to create. But in order to get there, she has to assume the power of being the queen and making decisions and
taking that responsibility.
Yes, taking on all that responsibility in order to get to this new world that she is trying to create. And it's a very... she very reluctantly takes this on because she does not really want...
Who does that remind you of?
This responsibility?
Aelin?
Yes, Aelin. But she doesn't really want this responsibility, but she realizes, I'm the only one that can do it.
Yeah. And she has all this power that's been gifted to her by her ancestors that she's attaining as she is in Prithian and uncovering the actual histories. She starts stepping into more of her star power. And as she returns back to Midgard, she lets her father believe that he's sort of got her trapped in his home. And she does it in a way because she knows that he has studied these histories for hundreds of years. And so she's trying to get information out of him and gain an understanding, too, of why did he want to know these truths? He's been searching for these truths on his own. What was his play? End game? What was his end game? And she realizes that theirs do not align, that he is power greedy and he is not going to be helpful. She needs to step into that role and remove him from power. So she also realizes there's this other Fae king across the pond, Cormac's father, that's got more information about this star power in these caves. It's always caves in these worlds. Have you noticed?
Yes.
Oh, there's always caves, whether it's Aelin going through the caves as she's coming, back to Rowan, or it's Feyre in the caves fighting the Midgard worm or whatever. It's always caves. Anyway.
And worms. We got worms
caves
coming in and out of these series too. That's another whole podcast.
Anyhow. But anyway, she goes through these caves, the Cave of Princes, to gain more information about her power. The kings show up. She's got her friends back in play. They managed to overcome the kings. So Bryce is truly now the queen of both Fae people. She's got that responsibility. And then she does end up talking with the princes of hell. She figures out that she can somehow communicate with them in these caves. We learn that Hunt is like a test tube baby prince of hell. That
was created for her.
Yeah, and that's why he has this lightning power. And they're meant to be. They are mates. And they prepare to ally with the princes of hell to take on the Asteri. And that is really kind of the climactic ending of the book. They go into this battle, and it's really beautiful. There are moments of friendship, and there's a moment where they get this. You remember the rebellion Kellie talked about a while back? These angels, these fallen, that tried to defeat the Asteri like 200 years ago. They managed to combine tech and magic to pull the souls of these people into tech and to fight off the Asteri. And Bryce combines the swords, and she creates a black hole, and she's getting rid of the Asteri. But wait, she gets sucked into the black hole.
Yes.
She's without oxygen, and she dies. And not unlike Feyre, not unlike Aelin, she is resurrected.
Yes. Which is another common theme through all 3 series is that main character is resurrected.
Yep.
And into their immortality.
Exactly. Feyre resurrected into Fae.
Yes.
And with more power. Aelin resurrected into her body, actually without power, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And then Bryce into more power again. And that sacrifice, she sacrificed herself. We see that, we've seen that as a part of her strength throughout. And as the book comes to a conclusion, she starts creating a government with her friends.
Yes.
And she takes herself out of power, creates a democracy, essentially. And that's really where we see the conclusion of the book is how are they going to move forward into this new world? But it's interesting to me, like, as we've wrapped House of Flame and Shadow, there are things I still want to know.
Well, and I think that's one of my criticisms of the book that I struggled with, because the way it ends, it kind of feels like an ending. But there's all, we talked about all these side stories.
Oh yeah, they're left undeveloped.
Like there's so much, like there were never, all those loose ends are left out there. Like all of these little side stories that you're like, wait, well, what happened to so-and-so? Because we never heard anything about her again. Or what happened to this person? Or where did they end up? There's so many side plots and side stories and all these different things going on. And it's all left kind of open. So even though it feels like a resolution, because we did get rid of the Asteri. Like, that's a big deal. We get rid of the Asteri.
What we've been trying to do for 2 books.
Yes. And she finally is able to accomplish that. And so the villains that are behind everything are gone. And, we've got this peaceful world, and they're creating this whole new government that is more of a democracy, and everybody has the same amount of power, and there's no, imbalance of power. And, so it almost feels like it's an end, but yet you're left like
a lot of things are unresolved.
All of these plot points were left unresolved, and it just creates this, as a reader, it created this dissonance in me that I'm like, hold up, like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I want to hear what happened to these people, and I want to hear what happened to this couple, and I want to hear what happened to her, because she just sort of disappeared. We never found out what happened to her. Why even bring her into the story? There's just a lot of those. I know, I get louder and more excited. Mandy's laughing at me. But that's what was so frustrating to me at the end of this story, until Mandy's like, there's going to be another book. You realize that, right? Like, this is not the end. There's going to be something else. We have to have another book, because there's so many things that are left undone. We can't all just live happily ever after and everything's great. Like, no. There's going to be another book. Towards the end, I haven't liked her the whole 3rd book, because she was just mean to the people that she should have, her allies that she should have been protecting more. But as some of these things are resolved for her character softens a little bit, and she goes back to more of a likable person. So I feel like moving forward, she's going to be more of the likable character that, not the rude person that she was in this 3rd book.
Well, and the interesting thing too is the timeline of this book is so short.
Oh my gosh.
It's only 10 days. So she's only in the caves in Prythian for like 5 days, and then she's back in Midgard for 5 days.
So the whole 3rd book, which is the longest of all the books, is only a 10-day time period.
Yeah. So like her being angry most of it still kind of makes sense when you look at it from that perspective, because of course she's not going to go from angry to peaceful super quickly, right? Like she's still coming to terms with all of these truths. And I imagine that's going to take some time and probably carry over some into the next book. But so the next podcast episode that we're going to cover, those of you that have read the book, you're like, wow, there are a lot of things you didn't talk about.
Yes.
That's true. There are a lot of things that we didn't talk about, because in the next episode that will come out next month, we're going to go over the other female characters in Crescent City, and there are a lot of them. I'm looking at a list of just like the positive characters that would be considered friends and allies, and there's 1, 2, 3. There's about 15 of those. Yes. And that's not counting the villains and other strong characters.
There's a very good chance we may have to break it into 2 podcasts in order to You know, we'll see. We'll see if
We're
we
going
can
to try to
condense
group
it.
some of the characters
But
together.
these are some very interesting characters, good and bad, and
some of them very gray.
There's so much strength in all of these women for different reasons that it's going to be a very interesting podcast. So we really hope you join us, because some of these side characters are super interesting.
Yes, and we're hoping that we get more of them in the next book. I am going to name drop one just because I think she's probably my favorite character right now out of that series, and that's Lydia Servos, the Hind. And if you've only read the second book or part of the first of the second book and you're listening to this, well, you've been spoiled a lot. And also you're probably wondering, why the heck would I be interested in her?
Why do y'all like her?
Yeah. But yeah, she's interesting, and we'll talk more about her in the next episode. Kellie, thank you so much.
This was fun.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/celebratingwomenpodcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women podcast.
Hey guys, it's Mandee. Have you been struggling to lose those extra pounds? Oh, I know. I have totally been there. An extra, 15 to 20 pounds can totally creep up on you in perimenopause. Or at least it has with me. And I think I found it early. I hope it's not happening to you. But if it is, I've got the solution. You can lose up to 15 pounds in 8 days with an incredible product line that I found and I want to share with you. Get a custom product recommendation with a complimentary wellness screening in the show notes. Just click Zing with Mandee.